event. All right, so let me then formally welcome all of you into today's webinar. I can see we have quite some people joining across Africa. I can see people from Southern Africa. I can see colleagues from Central Africa, others from Eastern Africa, as well as colleagues from West Africa, and I've seen one or two people from North Africa. So literally, the entire continent is here, and we'll be admitting more as we proceed. So allow me very quickly to just introduce to you today's session. We are looking at a very, very hot subject currently on the African continent, and this is how we can deepen our economic integration as a continent through the African Continental Free Trade Area. This is a subject that is very important to us as associations, both trade associations as well as professional associations, because we are looking at the opportunities that will ensue, once we integrate our professional services, our trade services, across the continent. For purposes of introduction, my name is Nicanor Sabula, and I'm the Managing Director of the African Association Management Company, hosts of these events, courtesy of the African Society of Association Executives. And joining me this afternoon as panelists for this session, my colleagues, Felix Okach. Felix, you may unmute and come on. Felix Okach is an individual that I've known for many, many years. He is a multilateral trade expert, and he will be telling us what exactly that means. And he's the immediate former chairperson of the Association of Professional Societies in East Africa, based in Nairobi, Kenya. We also have as our panelist, Mr. Papayas Kazawadi. He is from Rwanda, and he is the president of the Federation of African Engineering Organizations. Again, somebody that I've known for a couple of years, a very astute engineer and Pan-African at heart. And also my colleague, Admire Durunduru, who is a quality and mobility consultant at the Pan-African Federation of Accountants, PAFA. And again, a very astute colleague. I've followed some of the work he's been doing on the AfCFTA, integrating the accounting profession across the continent. So as you can see, we have quite a very high profile, speakers that are going to share with us on this subject matter. The objective of this webinar and why we are doing this really is to be able to raise awareness about the AfCFTA and how it affects our work in our associations, both professional and trade associations. So we are starting with the professional associations, and then the next one, we will be hosting a similar conversation for trade associations. The second objective of why we are doing this webinar this afternoon is to explore the role of professional associations in the integration and again in the implementation of the AfCFTA, because there's quite some exciting outcomes that we can get if we participate in this. Thirdly is to be able to highlight, we also want to be able to highlight the challenges and the opportunities we foresee for professional associations in this AfCFTA. And finally, we hope to have some proposals for a kind of a collaborative mechanism or network that we may want to build around the FSAE, but also amongst professional associations, for us to be able to jointly push, for these AfCFTA. It's a politically driven process, but I believe if we are able to get in as professional associations, we'll be able to move this for the benefit of our members. So how we're going to do these sessions today is that I will ask Felix to come and briefly just make a brief presentation, then we'll have a conversation with the rest of the panelists. But before that, I just wanted to invite the panelists to introduce themselves and the associate that they belong to, and then Felix can start. So let me start with you, Mr. Felix Okach, if you can get me. Just a brief introduction and the organization.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Felix.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Of course, I'm at Makuyu in central Kenya now on my way to Nairobi. My name's Felix Okach. I'm Emeritus Chair of the Association for Professional Science in East Africa, and I'm a consultant on international trade matters. That is matters concerning trade in goods, trade in services, trade intellectual property, and also dispute resolutions in line with the WTO. That's me. And of course, I'm an author of several books. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Felix. Can I have Admire? I can see you. If you could just introduce yourself and what you do.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important engagement of the professions supporting the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. So my name is Admire Ndurunduru, I think as you've introduced. I work with the Pan-African Federation of Accountants, currently as a director in Accountancy Quality and Mobility. The Pan-African Federation of Accountants is the organization of professional accountancy organizations in Africa. We are comprised of 56 members in 45 African countries, including 5 international affiliates. So we are a representative body of the accountancy profession, and we are very clear that as the professions, we have a role to play in the rollout of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admire. I can't wait for the conversation once we start. So I'm going to ask Felix to come in, and I'll be sharing his presentation. Felix, you're welcome to make the introductory remark and just set the context for the conversation today. Over to you, Felix Okach.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Very, very loud and clear.
The topic of discussion today is on the integration of professional services and roles of professional associations in implementation of Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Next slide. Run next slide from your end, Nick. Yeah. So the presentation outline, I'll be brief. I'll mention introduction of AfCFTA, what it is. Then, of course, this trade arrangement has to be compatible with World Trade Organization rules. Then I'll talk briefly on goods, trading goods, which was the main thing when WTO was formed. Then there'll be also some talks on intellectual property rights, because that's now a trade matter. Then I'll emphasize more on trading services, and I'll conclude with a way forward on the presentation. Next slide. When Africa Continental Free Trade was established in 2018, of course, it's comprised of 51 Africa countries, and it has come in to put all the regional trade agreements together. For example, there's East African Community Organization with about 5 partner states. There's COMESA with about 30,000 partner states. There's SADC, there's ECOWAS, and many more. So all these trading blocks in East Africa, South Africa, West Africa, North Africa represent 1.3 billion people. So when I talk of trade in goods and services and intellectual property, we are focusing on 1.3 billion people in the continent of Africa. Next slide. When AfCFTA was formed, of course, it's part of EAU discussions in 2018. The objectives were to create a single market for goods, services, and also facilitate movement of persons in order to deepen economic integration in the African continent, because Africa is very much scattered in terms of business. Then its aim was also to create a liberalized market in Africa for goods and services through rounds of trade negotiations. Because AfCFTA is concerned with the negotiations, the negotiations are eventually concluded on the way forward for purposes of trade. Then AfCFTA was also formed to lay foundation for establishment of a continental customs union at the later stages and many more, because customs issues are a big problem at country borders within Africa. Next slide. Of course, the specific actions were to realize, which was realized by three above objectives were: one, to progressively eliminate tariffs and non-tariff barriers to trade in goods. When a lot of tariff, we talk of whenever you're trading in countries are trading, the tariffs are taxes pay at the border. Then the other cases where certain things are related not taxes at the border, but regulations. For example, in the case of East Africa, maize can come from Tanzania into Kenya, then Kenya will claim aflatoxin. Or mad cow disease in Europe might make us not import meat from Europe. So those are not barriers which come in trade. Then it's hoped that out of this will progressively liberalize trade in services, which I'll explain at length. Because trade in services involves goods regulations, like the accounting part where commerce is involved, admission is involved, then engineering papers involved, architecture. There's so much. So all those will be part of trade in services. Now, one of the other objectives was to cooperate in investment, intellectual property rights, and competition policy within Africa. Also cooperate on trade-related issues that concern Africa and the rest of the world, because we're trading between ourselves and trading with the rest of the world. And also the intention is to cooperate on customs matters and implementation of trade measures, because trade measures are a big problem at the border and in terms of regulation. And it was also to establish a mechanism for the settlement of disputes concerning the rights and obligations for members. Because as you trade, normal disputes have come up. So it's important to have a trade dispute settlement committee which will look at these issues. Next slide. And of course, when you talk of compatibility with WTO, let me come back and mention that after World War II in 1947, that time issues of trade were mainly concerned with the tariffs. So there was a general agreement on trade and tariffs, which was formed in 1947. Of course, after World War II. It continued, and there were many trade round of talks going on up and down. And then one of the latest round of talks that then was the Uruguay round of talk, which was between 1986 and 1994. By the time that the talks of Uruguay were being concluded, it was agreed that now subjects of trade will involve tariff matters, will involve tariff measures, will involve rules. When I talk of rules, we are talking of rules of origin. Will it involve services, which was never before, but now it came in that agreement, will involve intellectual property rights, because invention has to be protected. And also to involve dispute settlements, also trade on agriculture, all this. The conclusion therein, in 1995, at the Marrakesh Agreement was concluded, then World Trade Organization was formed to be a regulatory body as far as trading global is concerned. Hence, our Africa Continental trade is falling in this category. Next slide. So, of course, there's arguments then. Of course, there was argument on agriculture. There was argument on application of phytosanitary measures. There's argument on technical barriers to trade. The argument on pre-shipment inspections. The arguments on rules of origin. There are arguments on subsidies. To mention this briefly, for example, in agriculture, some countries give support on agriculture, others don't. So those are issues which come to aspect of trade. When it comes to sanitary measures, for example, in Kenya, we export horticulture to Europe. Sometimes they set certain standards of how they want us to package or grow the flowers, and that can affect our business. When it comes to technical barriers to trade, there sometimes goods are not allowed to some countries because of technical regulations. Let me give an example in Kenya. In Kenya, the liquids come in liters, not in pounds or other measures or whatever it is. So the goods which come in Kenya must be in liters. On the other hand, in Kenya, cars are left-hand drive, right-hand drive. So left-hand drives technically are not allowed in our market. So that's an example of technical barriers to trade. Then coming to pre-shipment inspection. If goods are coming for say from Japan, from China, or Singapore, when they get to most countries, export to most countries, you got to have what's called pre-shipment inspection. They're inspected at the point when they are coming in, so that determine whether they're goods, what are the values for purposes of tax. So that's required as far as goods are concerned. Then the arguments of rules on origin. This is important, that because when you're getting goods from a given country, where's the source? Are you in that country? Are you in trade pact, trade agreement, or not trade agreement? Rules of origin also will help to capture aspects of trade. What the goods are imported to a country and are exported to a country. Then comes to subsidies issue. That's a very important issue, because if say European countries are giving subsidies to certain products and they bring them to our market, they injure our market. So important that we have arguments where when the goods are coming and they're subsidized, we should not tax them to a level such that they compete favorably with goods in our market. So those are issues that came up in WTO, and the discussion on them are going on as far as trade in goods is concerned. Next slide. Then, of course, I mentioned trade in goods. Then, of course, the argument has got aspects of trade in related intellectual property. Here, of course, you have protection of expression of interest, like music, like authors, broadcasting. All those have to be protected. Issues of trademark, you protect your sign, say sign of Toyota, sign of Mercedes-Benz, sign of whatever. So those are Coca-Cola, those are protected. There's the geographical indicators, things like wines or spirits from a given market, or tangerine tea. In Kenya, we've been talking of also for giving a geographical indicator to our Kericho tea, just for example. So all those are parts of trade-related aspect of intellectual property rights. Next slide. Then, of course, in trade, of course, industrial designs. You know, some industries have designed certain things. It does laptop, it designed certain cars. So that our design should not copy it, should be protected. Then come to patent medicines. You saw that time when you had COVID globally, the producers of medicines had to make sure that their medicines were given protection before releasing to the market. So all those inventions have to be protected, and that's part of trade. And of course, I disclose information like Coca-Cola. They will test Coca-Cola is secret, so they say this is our secret and this is our brand name. So we don't have to disclose it to you, but we need the protection on that. Next slide. I'm trying to be fast so that we get time for questions. Now here I'll take a bit of time. Ladies and gentlemen, the objective of discussion here is on trade services. And as I mentioned, initially the whole world were trading goods. The agreement of trade tariffs was in goods. So when WTO concluded the meetings in 1995, they came with a definition of service, which was agreed globally then. So that agreement on trade in services agrees as follows. One, that for purposes of trade in services, there's what's called Mode 1. This is a case where goods move from territory of one member country into the territory of another member without the individual moving. For example, you can do research in your country, send it somebody abroad and use it. For example, postal telecommunication, things which do with technology, where the consumer does not leave his country and the producer does not leave his country to go and provide the service. It's thus classified as Mode 1. It's a definition on trading services. The next one, definition of trading service was where one member of a service consumer goes to another country to consume a service. For example, education. Most days, there were days when Kenyans were going to India, to Britain for education. So that means they're going to assume service in that market. There were cases where people from abroad come to Kenya, tourists come to Kenya in one or another. That is the movement in consuming service in another country. In this case, the consumer, the fellow consuming service, crosses the border into another country to consume the service. Tourism, the fellow leaves his country, comes to Kenya to consume tourism service or another part of the world. So that's another mode of supplying services. The third definition on services is by a case of a service supplier of one member through commercial presence in the territory of another member. Here, another member in that country will leave his country then go and start a branch or an operating unit in a foreign country. Barclays have ABSA will come into Kenya. Some Kenyan companies go to DRC, in Uganda, Tanzania, banks to open branches, commercial presence. So commercially, they are present there, but its ownership is in the parent country. This kind of mode 3 is the one to talk foreign direct investment, because multinational come to Africa to invest, and what they get from us is the profit, but the business continues. That's a service. Mode 4, the last one. This is a case where a service supplier of one country goes as a natural person to provide service and come back to his country. Say a consultant, academician here, would go and offer accounting service in another country, or engineering services, or veterinary services, and come back to his country. In this, which case, most cases, they require work permits and permissions to go into those countries, conduct certain service, and come back to their country, not to become citizen. Good example, in Kenya, you see our sportsmen, normally when they go for marathon abroad, just providing sports service. They will go, they win the marathon, immediately after the marathon, they come back to their country with their money. So that's a service, that category of mode 4. I felt I should let me explain that so that we understand going forward. Let's go to the next slide now, put it in graphic forms. Of course, Nico will share this presentation with members. So the mode 1, which I explained here, is a case of service supply is in one section, and service consumer in another section. Here, the service supplier offers service without moving to another country. The service consumer receives the service in his own country. Examples of these services are services provided through telecommunication, postal infrastructure, telemedicine, distance learning, as I've mentioned, because there's some amount of some online learning where you don't go to that country, but you do online education and eventually get a certificate. So that's mode 4. In this case, of course, services moving across between one country to another, and of course, payments crossing the border because it's business. Let me explain mode 2 now. Let's go to mode 2. Next slide. Mode 2, which I mentioned, is commercial presence. Consumption abroad. Let me repeat, consumption abroad. You go to consume service in that country. Here, the service applied in the territory of member of service supplier. Service supplier, in this case, is on the left. And then the fellow in another country, service consumer, comes to consume service in the country of the service supplier. Give an example of tourism. Somebody leaves that country to come and consume tourism in Kenya. Give an example of Kenyans leaving that country to go and consume education services in Britain. I'll give an example also when Kenya, medical issues sometimes people leave Kenya to go and get medical attention in places like India. So this is mode 2, where the service supplier supplies service from his country, but the consumer comes to his country to get the service. That's mode 2. It's called consumption abroad. Let's move to mode 3. Mode 3 is the one which most of us talk about a lot, foreign direct investment, multinationals like it. In this case, the service supplier establishes commercial presence the territory of another member. I'll give a local example. I'm sorry, I'm giving much of a local example because I'm in Kenya. Is a Kenyan bank or insurance firm going to start business in DRC, Uganda, or Tanzania, open a branch there. So it's a type of business there is a business established in that country. So the consumer service is in that country, but the supply is from another country. It goes through by commercial presence, it goes by opening a business. So this is commerce. That's where it's commercial presence. The service supplied through commercial presence. That's mode 3. Can you go to mode 4, the last one? Sorry, I'm rushing through because I know there's aspect of time and I need to give time for questions. In the case of mode 4, here is a case where the service supplied through the presence of a natural person of a member country in the territory of another. A consultant living in this country, consider an example I give of Papias or you go and offer that service in another country. You don't become a citizen. You offer the service and come back. You are a consultant. So this is mode 4. Now, challenge in mode 4 is that sometimes there's work permit, many other issues, restrictions in terms of education, requirements in terms of mutual agreement, many issues come in, but that's mode 4, where the individual goes to offer service and then comes back. That's mode 4. Let's move on now. So basically, that's what came up in the agreement on trade and services when we were talking in 1995 in that agreement. And of course, in that agreement, they have classified services. Then were services concerned with business, communication services, construction and related engineering services, education services. Remember, I mentioned cases where people go abroad and come back. I'm not sure. Can't you speak what? Okay. Environment services, financial services, the banking and the lot. There are also cases where health and related services, tourism services, recreation services, transport and other services. I hope I'm being heard. I saw some link and I didn't read it properly. I hope I'm being heard. Next slide, please. So the benefits of trade in services, this is the last but one slide. The benefits of trade in services, of course, it will raise standard of living when countries trade. And two, most countries these days, they get more from trade in services than in goods. Like in Kenya, 60% of trade we get more from services. So services is increasing phenomenon. Also, benefits of trade in services, it ensures full employment of resources, labor moving to one country and coming back, also capital entrepreneurship moving. Then, of course, service expands support in production of goods and other non-agricultural goods, manufacturing, things like that, because the aspect of transport and telecommunication. Then other benefits of service, of course, is political, economic, and environmental advantages, because normally when people trade, they don't go to war, they're keen on trade. Then, of course, there's an increase in gross domestic product of a country. GDP of a country is measured in terms of consumption, investment, and also trade. So when you get more money out of export and services, it increases the GDP of a country. And of course, service trade assists in transfer of technology. Like now what we are talking about, this is service, and it's coming in place. And then also aspect of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, now on the internet, this is service, which shows service is in thing. And of course, as I mentioned, mode 3 is direct investment. Whenever we talk of direct investment in third world countries, people coming from Europe, America, Singapore, China, or Japan, it is through mode 3 coming and invest in our markets. I think that should be the end of the presentation, Nick. I thank members for listening to me carefully, attentively. I think I'll go to the last slide. Yeah, thank you for your undivided attention. Any questions and comments? And I hope this slide will be shared. I was talking quickly because I had to give others time to ask questions. Thank you very much, listeners.
Thank you very much, Felix, for just those introductory remarks and setting context really in terms of what trade in services, looks like, and the general global framework that manages that. I know there is a question that has come up in the chat, and I do encourage everybody to just share on the chat, even as a speaker, speak to this topic. And there was just a whole question around the relationship between global framework on trade in services and directly what the AfCFTA will talk about. So I'll come back to you to be able to just create the linkage. But I wanted to ask Admire if you could just come in and provide some context to what Felix has shared and what you experience, from the Pan-African Accountants, Federation, how you're looking at this and the relevance, and just bring it down what the AfCFTA really means from the accountant's perspective. I know it's still an emerging space, but just speaking to what Felix has laid as a background.
Thank you very much once again for setting up this platform to share our experiences. So we have heard from the trade experts giving context to the birth of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and its interconnectedness with the World Trade Organization protocols, and delving deeper into trading services, which I think for us as professional associations, we find our role clearly defined. So, having heard from the trade expert, I will tackle this from a position to say, what would be our role as the professions on the continent to facilitate the rollout or the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. So from where we stand as the Pan-African Federation of Accountants, we took this from a position where we are saying the professionals or the professions are there to clear or to facilitate around the barriers to trade that are there. So we work on clearing the barriers so that we can facilitate the driving of trade integration and sustainability on the continent. So again, laying the background, we need to realize that there are direct and indirect parties to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement whose actions and decisions would affect the implementation process, and those direct and indirect parties are considered to be key players. And when put together, these players, they operate in ecosystems and interact in ecosystems to facilitate trade. So I will just quickly run through at first instance the 5 or 6 ecosystems that as professions we need to facilitate. The first one is the business ecosystem, the finance ecosystem, the professional services ecosystem to which as professional organizations we come through, and then the institutional ecosystems and policy and political ecosystems. These are the players, direct and indirect players involved in trade. So, as professionals or professional organizations, what are we there to unlock? And as I've said previously, we are there to unlock the barriers to trade. And these barriers to trade, at the first instance, I will just list them, and then as the conversation goes, we can delve deeper. So the barriers to intra-Africa trade, the financial barriers are: one, we have payment systems limitations, whereby if we to trade amongst ourselves as African countries, the payments intermediation has to happen outside the continent. So that's one of the barriers that we need to overcome. And as the professions, it is within our lane to ensure that we deal with that. The second barrier is poor infrastructure on the continent. Access to finance is the third barrier. The fourth one, which is again as professions we need to really seriously deal with, is variation in laws, standards, and policies amongst the 55 member countries. Prospects of revenue losses. So with the opening up of the market, there are those inherent fears to say, if we open up and remove the trade barriers, there may be revenue losses to our economies. Then there is the obvious thing of double taxation or proliferation of taxes, which then affects or acts as a barrier to trade. So those are the financial barriers. I'll quickly speak to non-financial barriers. One of the things, and I've seen comments already on this conversation, is the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement information gap amongst the professionals, not really appreciating or understanding what this is all about, and then placing the professionals or the profession's role as super connectors to facilitate trade. Again, the issue of skills gap in terms of trade, bureaucracy within governments acts as a non-financial barrier. Political instability in some regions of the continent creates a barrier. Then variation in product standards. And then another big one, culture and language differences. So having positioned the barriers to intra-Africa trade, which the professions are supposed to then unlock as we facilitate the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we can then have this discussion. So I've just listed the barriers, financial and non-financial. If time permits, we can go into some form of detail into some of the critical ones. But this is, in my view, these are the issues that the professions have to deal with to facilitate trade or intra-Africa trade. I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admire. Thank you. I think you've raised quite some pertinent issues, you know. I think there's a lot of focus that usually is placed on the non-financial barriers, and very little focus is given to the, you know, the financial barriers that, you know, as you mentioned. And maybe at this point, let me just ask the group, because we are a small, intimate group, if you have any intervention or if you want to make any comments, please just alert me and I'll be able to allow you. But I wanted to come to both of you, Admire and Felix, and in context is a very recent conversation that is happening here in Kenya, where I think we have just allowed lawyers from Rwanda and Burundi to be able to practice, you know, law here. And already there is an uproar, people saying that there is, already we are experiencing unemployment. You know, we've got lawyers that are qualified and they are unable to find opportunities, and yet we are opening this up, you know, to lawyers from other countries to come and practice here. And for me, I find that argument really preponderous in terms of we're just opening up a huge market for all of us. I want you to speak to that, and in two perspectives. One, of course, for us to be able to allow professionals to trade across the borders, there are certain hurdles that we must overcome. And you've mentioned some of them being the language. But I also know there is a challenge in terms of the recognition of the qualification and certifications. I don't know how or if there's any mode that we can work as professional associations to ensure that we harmonize our professional qualifications, so that if I'm a lawyer in Kenya wanting to go and practice in the DRC or in Senegal, and then there's a framework within which that mutual recognition of our qualification is based on. I don't know, maybe just a quick comment on that from both of you, and then I will open this up to the forum just to make contributions to that and ask any specific questions.
No,
Can I start by comment? Oh, sorry.
Okay. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much for allowing me to go ahead. You know, services are regulated. For example, you talk to lawyers. In Kenya, for you to practice law, you must go through Kenya School of Law, and the certain exams you must pass. Then you go get a certificate to practice as a lawyer, as you can go to courts. Others will not. Same with medicine. The Kenya Medical Association, Kenya Medical Association must certify you that you are qualified enough to be given license to see patients in our hospitals. Others can't be allowed. The same thing, other countries do it. In Britain, in Europe, you can't go and just practice. the regulations are there. So services, what's important is the regulations. Like if you talk accountant, which was mentioned by my friend Admire, you see in accounting, you can have PhD in accounting, but if you go to Kenya, for example, get into Kenya, you must come through ISPA, you do the exam or get exemptions, then you can audit books for public good. So services are regulated from this perspective. So it's important to note that even geology, architecture, engineering, that's what happens. So the regulations must, each country must have regulation. So in our case also, we need to protect our market regulation for ourselves and also for people coming from outside. And in the case of Kenya and the movement of persons, you can have the license, but if you're not given permit to get to the country, you're not getting this. So those issues come into play as far as service is concerned. So there's aspect of regulation and then also movement of persons. So it's important for us to know that unless we protect our market and know what's required, it's not easy. Service is not just straightforward as a thing. Then let me explain mutual recognition before I forget that. Mutual recognition will be the accounting body in another country, Zambia or Tanzania, would say that in our case, these are the requirements for practice accounting. In Kenya, these are the requirements. So let us have an agreement where that when somebody crosses the border to offer accounting services in each of the countries, we got exemptions. So we have a mutual agreement. But it's for a while. But also you must know that Kenya, the African Free Trade Area, is doing things incompatible with WTO, and that's the whole world. So if you allow someone to get to your market without any regulations from India or Japan or Britain, they'll come in, they'll flood your market, but they're not allowed to go to the market because of regulations. So services, what are here is mainly the regulations, and we need to protect our markets.
Admire, any comments on that? I still have some questions for Felix.
Thank you very much. And so the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, I think, is there to facilitate intra-Africa trade in goods and services. And this has come from our political leadership towards achieving Vision 2063, the Africa we want. So if we are to go on ahead and then say, because opening up this profession will subject us to competition, our own trained lawyers are failing to find opportunities, why not position it this way? In Zimbabwe, there are 15 million of us. And if we are to close up that market, we're then saying our lawyers, our engineers, our accountants can only service those 15 million people. But with the coming in of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we are saying instead of servicing 15 million citizens of your jurisdiction, the market has been opened up to 1.3 billion. So what would we rather have? Do we want to protect the small 15 million or to embrace, yes, with regulations and standards, but embrace and facilitate the mobility of professionals to service the 1.3 billion Africans? So for me, I will position your question into two aspects, and then I'll briefly talk about what the accountancy profession is doing and give an example of the East African community. To unblock the barriers to trade, one of the things that we need to do is to, I think I'm suffering from broadband issues, maybe let me stop my video. One of the things is to understand professional linkages, not just as lawyers or as accountants, but to realize that there are interdependencies between the professions For example, for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we need the legal profession to provide other professions with the legal perspective of the framework, which we understand the framework is a legal document. And then, for example, we can have the accountants and finance professionals understanding the policies and regulations that affect trade so that they are able to help the key players across ecosystems in understanding the impact of their business decision. So what are we doing as the accountancy profession? This African Continental Free Trade Area has come from the top. We do have regional economic blocks like the East Africa Community, SADC, etc. I would rush to say that for the East Africa community, we actually have a more integrated accountancy profession with CPAs trained in Kenya being eligible to move across to offer services in Rwanda, in Tanzania, etc. through mutual recognition agreements. At PAFA, or as the accountancy profession, we are working on establishing mutual recognition agreements across the continent, but we realize the challenges with that and the different levels of development. So the approach we have taken is regional mutual recognition agreements, which will then in the future lead to a continental mutual recognition. But all this should be underpinned by quality. If you are offering quality accountancy services, for example, or quality audit services, and you are using harmonized standards, I do not see any plausible reason why you should not be able to go and offer these services in a neighboring country or neighboring region. So currently we are working on establishing regional mutual recognition agreements, which are based on quality, based on international standards on accounting and auditing, and also a platform to monitor the quality of accountancy services on the continent. So the integration of professional communities becomes very key in facilitating the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And lastly, harmonization of laws, standards, and policies. So if we are working on a similar platform of accounting standards, what should stop a professional accountant, CPA trained in Kenya, from offering services in, say, Egypt, if we are using the same standards? This is what trade in services is, the General Agreement on Trade in Services is looking at. It's not saying an underqualified person in one country is then allowed to go and offer services in the next country. Properly qualified, licensed, registered, and regulated, then you can then be allowed to offer services. So we are really working on the mutual recognition agreements, and that will be part of reducing the non-financial barriers to trade. Thank you. I will stop here for now.
Thank you very much, Admire. I think for making those points across very, very clearly. Yeah, and I agree with you. We're not talking about the unqualified people. We're talking about qualified persons looking for opportunities, and where there is shortage of those opportunities, I personally don't see why, in promoting intra-Africa trade, we shouldn't allow, qualified Africans to be able to move across to offer the much needed, services where they are available. I want to see if there's anyone that wants to make an intervention from the group, from the participants. I know, Dumi, you had a question. Are you still there? Just around how do we regulate, our extraction of our mineral resources? Yeah. Do you want to push that, Dumi, and just speak to that a little bit more in detail. Dumi Magadlela, if you're there.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just clarify, what would you like me to speak to?
No, I see your comment here on the extraction of natural resources and the issues of IP and how we protect that. Maybe just an introduction of your organization, and then you can push through the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm enjoying this discussion and loving it. And thank you. Thank you, Felix. And thank you, Admire, for the brilliant responses and overview. I see the chat is very much alive. I am currently chair of the largest body of coaches and coaching globally, the international body of coaches called the International Coaching Federation, ICF. And that is a professional association of coaches, not psychologists, but coaches that work with psychologists, but that work with leaders around the world. But there's a difference on that. So I was drawn to this because I work with the African Union on leadership. I'm a trainer on leadership, on coaching and mentoring and training leaders around the world in business schools. I am fascinated by how we can bring this in terms of services. So you're mentioning you're mentioning natural resources. I didn't refer to natural resources. I referred to knowledge and wisdoms, and those services that are not, let's call it, not as tangible, but knowledge and wisdom services that are provided through those health services, indigenous knowledge systems that anchor a lot of what we do. For me, there's a blind side around that because it's not as regulated or organized as we would like it to be. But there's been a lot going on for many years, decades, if not centuries, of extraction of that. And this impact health services, and they impact also all other services, including how we conduct. You can even mention education. So for me, as associations, we need to think about these things and think beyond the narrative of the normal way of doing it, and expand our scope of what we consider to be our, let's call it, our range. So, but thank you so much. I'm loving this. Unfortunately, I have a 3 o'clock meeting. I have like in a minute. I need to dash off. I wish I could come right back after my meeting. I'll try and shorten it. Thank you so much. Please keep us in the mailing list.
Thank you very much, Tumi. I wanted to hear the perspective, Rick Taylor. If I see you on the call, and we're talking about tourism and travel services. I think they were under mode 4, and how, as you know, we did mention the infrastructure issue and the movement of persons. For us to be able to move from one part of the continent to the other, we need an enabling infrastructure there, and our travel infrastructure remains very weak. So even when we talk about trade in professional services, moving from one part of the continent to the other, that still remains a challenge. I don't know that, Rick Taylor, you want to speak to that, and particularly the challenge that many associations will experience when you're doing your conferences across the continent. You need to move professionals or members of your associations or your community from one part of the continent to the other. What do you see? What would you say would be the challenges of that movement of people to people? And what can the AfCFTA probably work on for the benefit of the tourism industry? Rick, if you are on, I'll give you the chance.
And a very warm afternoon to you, Nick, and all the fine minds in the room. Yeah, absolutely. As you'll appreciate, we are fundamentally in the prime role of setting up convention bureaus across the continent, and part and parcel of winning international bids and foreign direct investment that comes with it from an economic perspective. It's so key to have a strong association platform, strong association foundation. And that's what I'm really enjoying about this conversation this afternoon, Nick, is that I know as a continent, we are very much at the beginning of an enormously successful and wonderful future, but we need to get this foundation certainly solidified as we go forward. Right now, I think if you look at many a destination in terms of a SWOT analysis, in terms of, where is the continent, and in turn double click as far as many countries are concerned, a general weakness is generally in the association space. And this is something we need categorically to strengthen off the back of this fine conversation that's going around the room this afternoon. So you are a big fan of ours, Nick and team, and anything in the association arena, we are only too happy to lend support and help amplify as convention bureaus, as countries sort of concretize their strategies in the MICE arena. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very much.
Nick, can I weigh in, Nick?
Yes, yes, the intervention wizard, I can't quite. Okay, go ahead. You got the floor.
Yeah, of course.
Felix,
The Africa Continental Free Trade is one of the best things has ever come, because now we're realizing we need to trade with one another, talk with one another. The era of looking towards EU and US should be gone. So we encourage trade between us. In trade literature, there's something called gravity theory. It means that when countries share a common border, in most cases, there'll be a common language, there'll be common currency, and common culture. Like in East Africa, Swahili is common. West Africa, is also similar English and French is common. So we need to encourage trade between ourselves in goods and in services. When it comes to services, let's look at the regulations. If say in Zambia, this is the quality standards required for an accounting person. Let's find out that those regulations allowing someone to practice accounting in Zambia through mutual recognition are the same in Kenya, so that we harmonize these rules and then we trade seamlessly. But this is the time for Africa to move together in terms of trade.
So perhaps the question that I would have for both of you again is, we're talking really about the role of professional associations here. And one of the things that we lack on the continent is collaborations and partnerships within associations of the same field or the same trade, and cross related association. I'll give you an example. The lack of the collaboration between, let's say, medical associations and accounting associations, or marketing associations and geological associations. Why? Because we work a lot in silos, and where they exist, you'll find probably there's an attempt to create regional associations of the same trade, of the same associations, or Pan-African. The example of the Accountants Federation. What are some of the opportunities you see for cross collaboration between associations of diverse, sectors? I would like to hear your comments on that. But at the same time, I wanted to listen to Professor Solomon Ratemane, whom we've worked with very, very closely. I mean, he's a professor in South Africa universities. Professor,
thank you very much. Greetings.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the conversation. It means a lot for Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear what your thoughts are in terms of trade in education services across the continent, opportunities that AfCFTA can bring to that.
I think this is very key. I have listened to a number of videos where this topic was discussed by bigger groups than we are now, particularly at the launch of the trade agreement, because a colleague of mine, Sol Molobi, hosts these webinars. One of the questions that I really want to ask is, what is a stumbling block? Why are some of the African countries taking long to sign the trade agreement or to be part of it. Is there a problem in terms of the economic status of each of the countries? Should that be a problem? And if it is a problem, how can it be resolved?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that question. Over to you, Admire. Do you want to go first, and then Felix?
Thank you very much. So I will try to respond to your question and then also the question by Professor Solomon in terms of what is stopping the next step in terms of the rollout of the agreement. So
Yes.
How can we integrate the different professions? As I have said in my opening remarks, to say our role as the professions is to facilitate trade. And this trade is being guided by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where we have been given the policy direction. So one of the things that we need to have at the back of our minds as the different professions is we need to understand professional linkages. You cannot have, for example, accountants running the whole trade value chain. Remember, I mentioned the issue of ecosystems in trade. So if we understand our professional linkages, it will help us in bridging the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement information gap. Various professions can collaborate amongst each other, and that collaboration in areas that are key to trade, such as, for example, I've given this example before, legal profession in developing dynamic understanding of the linkages brought about by trade. They can then provide the legal interpretation or legal perspectives of what we are trying to do. Then we can have the engineers coming in only if, as the professions, we can listen to each other and trust the professional competence coming through from the different specialist professionals. Then we can, as a body of professionals, facilitate or act as super connectors to trade. As the under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, one of the issues that I think if from this platform we can take forward is the integration of professional communities. You mentioned, Nicola, that the professions, we operate in silos to achieve the same objective. If we are to move together, if we journey together, we can go far. But if we then say, as the legal profession, we understand this framework and we are going on ahead, yeah, you can move very fast, but then face barriers where you would need an engineer to unlock or a communications expert to unlock. So I think the African Union can play a central role in bridging these gaps that we find, and we give excuses to say because of cultural differences, then we operate as our own small communities. But this can be bridged. Language barriers amongst various professional communities across Africa can still be removed or reduced through sector-specific engagements. So the coming in of a platform like this, where the professions can be heard, I guess is a start of the professions really playing a critical role in facilitating trade. So that is to your question. And then to the question by Professor Solomon. Here is my thinking. we need to back ratification with action. So is it 54 of the 55 countries have signed the protocols for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which is a legal document representing an agreement on terms and conditions necessary to create barrier-free trade on the continent. These terms and conditions can only be operationalized by people and organizations only when they are incorporated in national economic policies and guidelines. And this is where the professions again play a key role by really explaining or bridging the information gap and determining the economic impact of these policies and guidelines and helping organizations to implement them in line with the trade integration agenda. It is us as the professional associations who can facilitate and move from ratification to action. The commitment to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is there, but there is need for action. And as the professions, we can facilitate that. I hope I've provoked enough, Prof. Solomon. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I agree with you.
Absolutely. I do also. Felix, you wanted also to chime in?
Can I weigh in briefly? One, of course, when you talk of professional, we are talking of an individual who has been trained on certain subjects and he knows it. So in most cases, professional like this, we say accountant, doctor, geologist, architect, engineer, is an individual who has been trained on a given line and certified, passed certain exams. And after passing those exams, a body for which is a member normally registers him for purpose of practicing. Because after license, that is a person good behavior or not, conduct or not. Then these days, a professionals go through continuous professional development. It's not that because you are a doctor, veterinary engineer, a geologist, that's enough. The world is changing, technology is changing, so he has to go through certain continuous professional requirement annually. Lawyers do it, but medicine, doctors do it, even accountants do it in Kenya. Then, of course, he's got that member of the association has to make sure that he's a person of good conduct. Let me give an example of good conduct so that it's weighs in Kenya. Say somebody is a surveyor. He's not registered, but qualified as a surveyor. He's not in good conduct, but thinks he's of good conduct. He does not have practice certificate. Individuals are looking for loan. They would go for him to value property, and the bank would say that this is a surveyor. Let us right surveyor. Let us give loan based on what he has told us. But it's not a person in good standing in that association. So a person like that one, it means that his association should punish him, or we should make sure they follow regulations as required, so that he can practice that role. You see, in Kenya, we've had cases where we've got fake doctors and fake lawyers. So those regulations are very important as far as these things are concerned. So going forward, in terms of once come to Professor Solomon's remarks, which were good, is that what we need is to harmonize regulations in various professional associations, understand what they are, and see how we can harmonize it between countries. Two, we got language barrier, of course, but we can try to overcome it. Of course, the colonizers had put us in blocks. There's Anglo and the Franco, but those ones we can try to go over these days. Because of technology, I mean, the other day I was in Côte d'Ivoire, but because of the technology, I use the Google and I can quote a bit of French, and the other fellow would understand me when I was 14 through technology. Now, the economic disparities in Africa are quite high, and I just want to give one example for us to note. In a country like Ethiopia, and say, let me start in Kenya. In Kenya, if you came to this country, up to a maximum of $500,000, you can come with that money today and live with it tomorrow. Nobody will stop you. It's your money. In some countries, of course, in Ethiopia, that's the Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, you go with your money today, $500,000, it's accepted. The next day, when you want to leave, you have to go to central bank, get permission, and they might not give you money back because there's not enough foreign currency. I'm just giving an example of those differences. And there are many in Africa. So the coming of Africa Free Continental Trade Area is to assist us discuss these issues. In a forum of this nature, Nick, it should be continuous. so that we look at what are our issues from economic perspective, from political perspective, and then social, because we have the potential, as we noted, 1.3 billion people. If we trade between ourselves, the sky is the limit for us. Thank you.
It's really getting interesting. I know we're running out of time, but it's getting interesting. I don't know whether there's anyone from the floor who has a comment they want to make. Before I come back to the two panelists and ask if really they see hope, in the integration of our professional services and in the success of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Those are the comments I will come to you as we close. But I just wanted to give an opportunity to the floor. If there's anyone who has a question or a comment they wish to make, this will be the right time to do that. Anyone from the platform?
Can I make a comment, Nick?
Go ahead, Johannes.
Yeah, I want first of all to thank you for bringing us together on this forum. Then I want to say that we, the associations, are in a very advantaged position to help the continent operationalize the free trade in our services are concerned. Professional services are concerned. And to have this, we need to have close links, like an earlier speaker said. We need to have very close links, work very closely across our countries in the societies and professional associations that we already have, and to aim at having an umbrella body for each professional association, so that we can help our countries to harmonize not only the standards, but also the practice in our various professions. That was my comment, and thank you very much.
Okay, I'll take another comment from the floor if there is.
Yes, Nick, my input would be that we should not be tired of having webinars, opportunities for discussion at all of our meetings. You know that you and Jeffers have been leading the process, and I think we should continue it. I'm not necessarily in favor of a number of umbrella organizations. I think we need to strengthen AfCFTA more, to do more of what it is doing. And we reach out to all the African countries, and that will inspire others to start up something else. But the idea is that professionals do suffer if this free trade agreement is not implemented. There are stumbling blocks that we know. So the more we enlighten people, that is more advocacy, more education, most probably our leadership will understand and agree to implement as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you. Really, really appreciate for your comments and support and the vision of creating a singular voice for associations to be able to advocate and push for some of these things. They start as political processes, but politics is politics. We have to get hold of opportunities that we find are beneficial to our members, to our communities. So that point is well taken. I know we have been joined by one of our panelists, came in a bit late due to some circumstances. But before I come to him, I just wanted to go back to the forum to see if there's anyone else who has comments to make before we go to the to wind up. Anyone else?
Make a comment.
Jeffers, go ahead.
Actually, just because of time, this is a conversation which we should have like part two, because the African free trade, continental free trade agreement is something which we're all trying to learn and also trying to understand how it operates. But I also want, necessarily, if we can learn, and most of us have done that learning from how EU has come along the way to be where it is. For me, some of the key challenges that we have in Africa, and admire put them clearly, and he actually elaborated. The cultural aspect, if we talk about the cultural aspect, where in Africa, we have different cultures in terms of languages and other cultures. If actually you look at the EU, almost every country in EU has a different language, but they have been able to integrate very easily. So I think there must be a deliberate effort from the leadership. With our unstable political situations in Africa, you realize that once a leader comes in, especially in more democratic countries like Kenya, the leader who comes wants things to be done in his own way. It's like the other leadership which was there before them was not doing much. At the same time, there is a problem where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. Mm-hmm. And I can give you an example. I know that South Africa is very, very, very big in terms of conference tourism. And they're always all over promoting the destination, making sure that they attract as many meetings as possible to South Africa. But it happens when you're actually having a conference in South Africa, then there is also the Department of Home Affairs, which is supposed to facilitate issuance of visas. Then it's like they really don't know or they don't care about what the Department of Tourism has been doing to promote the destination. Those are just some of the examples where the right hand really doesn't know the left hand is doing, and that basically is a fragmentation within government. If a government cannot have one voice to be able to coalesce together and bring all the departments together and speak one voice, we are going to have challenges, because we'll have somebody trying so hard to do something, where the other one is trying so hard to actually sabotage what the other people are doing. As long as we still have that mentality, I think we have a long way to go. But again, I want to thank the panelists. This is really fantastic. And Nick, if possible, we need to have part 2 of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks. Now on to the panelists. Maybe
thank you.
Okay, Victor. I see Victor. Yeah, Victor, go ahead. Victor? Sid. Okay. Victor, did you have a comment to make? Go ahead, Victor, and unmute. Unmute, Victor, and then make your comment.
Ouais, Victor, Côte d'Ivoire.
Victor, yeah.
AGC, Association Jeunesse et Enfants de Côte d'Ivoire.
Vas-y.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay, merci. All right. Yeah, just again, representation from across the. Now, as we wind this up, I wanted to hear from you, Felix, and then I'll come to you, Kazawadi, just to be able to make your closing remarks. But Felix, what will be your closing remarks? Is there a future for Africa in the AfCFTA, particularly in trading services? Do you see that future, or it's just all political talk?
Before I come to that, let me say to my friend Victor Pokudi. One time I was Pokudi in the Coast. Good place, though. Now, there's a future. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Felix.
You remember in my presentation when I started, there was GATT 1947, there was WTO Form 1905, there was EU coming up, the Asians have had theirs, NAFTA Americans have had theirs. This is the time for us in Africa. So there's a future in this a lot. And your population, which is required. And this Africa Continental Free Trade Area is showing us that now let us trade among ourselves, increase incomes among our people. So there's a future in this undertaking. As they always say, a journey of 1,000 miles starts one step. Thank you, Nick, for this step. You see, we just started the webinar. You see, the next step, we need more on this. So there'll be much more on services, intellectual property, in goods, and the whole lot. So there's future, and I thank you hosting this webinar. You've done a good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Admire, any comments from you? What do you think? Is there a future, or are we just engaging in our usual political gymnastics as a continent?
Thank you very much again for setting up this platform and this conversation. So I sincerely believe that there is a future and this is the way to go. The AU Agenda 2063 provides an opportunity for the professions in Africa to demonstrate their priorities for building a better world through trade integration. Intra-continental trade is a key vehicle for achieving sustainable economic development in Africa, and the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement presents a major opportunity for the professions to play a super connector role, driving collaboration, inclusiveness, and improved efficiency. Further, the barriers to intracontinental trade across identified ecosystems must be understood. You cannot go in blindly and say, this will be all good. We need to understand the barriers. We must identify the key players to be supported, collaborated with, and led by the profession in maximizing the benefits of the agreement. Lastly, the professions must increase advocacy for and dialogue about the development of sustainable and feasible trade and finance policies at national level to improve country-by-country operationalization of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. As the accountancy profession, we have done a study which will be launching soon, which we have titled the
Did we lose you? I think we lost you there, Admire.
Oh, I'm back now?
Yes, you're back now. Yeah.
Thank you. So my last point was that as a profession, we have done a study which we will be launching soon, which we have titled Journey to 2063, the professions empowering the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. And I think for the launch, we need a platform like this where we have the various professions coming through and maybe instituting similar research for the different professions so that we have an umbrella guiding document, not a policy document, but which really explains the issues that affect accountants, the legal, the engineer, the medical, to facilitate trade, intra-Africa trade. So yes, there is a future, and the future lies with you and me and with all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Zawadi, before I come to you just to wind up, I want to acknowledge my colleague Mulemwa Mungwa, who is joining us from Zambia, a very big proponent of intra-Africa travel. Mulemwa, if you're there, maybe just I'll give you a few seconds to speak to the intra-Africa travel, if you're there. Can give you a minute.
I'm here, Nicola. I'm so sad.
We'll be having you in our next session when we talk about the trends in services. Just a second, Mulemwa, to make your quick comments on intra-Africa travel.
Okay, I'm so sad because I had you in my time zone. So this is my 3:30. For some reason, I am so sorry, but I hope we'll get the recording. So from my point of view, I work in business tourism, and I think we were the most affected because leisure still used to happen during the pandemic. Now, in recovering, I think the saving grace for Africa is going to be intra-Africa travel, and the associations movement is what needs to be strengthened, because from the destination's point of view, they've not woken up to the power and potential of the associations movement in Africa, because we are basically the foundation for all conversations, whether it's engineers, doctors, but from our point of view as associations, we are very quick to send out invitations to outside Africa when we're hosting. So from a tourism point of view, I think it's time that we started to rethink and to relearn how to grow the associations movement with an intra-Africa perspective. How are we going to do that? Leveraging the numbers, because just teachers in my country could be in the 100,000s, teachers from K to 12, educators at higher levels. So it means the whole year, if I was managing educators' events, I could pretty much have numbers coming in the whole year. But that is applicable across all other sectors. So I'm very keen to hear what conversations you had before I joined, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to just chime into the conversation. So thank you so much, Nikano.
Thank you, Malema. Over to you, Kasawadi. I know you joined us a bit late, and again, because of these time issues, one of the things we need to harmonize as well. Kasawadi, over to you, maybe to give also your closing remarks.
Thank you, Nicanor, and I really apologize because I got lost in the timing. And by the time you made the call to me, I was in about 5 kilometers away, and I had left all the gadgets at home. So I really appreciate. However, I commend what I just found other speakers talking about. There is a future within the AfCFTA, but we need to do things not the way we are used to. We need to do it differently if we are to get different results. And we need to collaborate more. Now, as associations, we need to find a way of changing to speaking to ourselves. I think we are trying to convert the converted, and there is still a big people that are not converted, who are even not aware of what we are doing and what we are saying now. So I really urge this group or this platform to find different other ways of reaching out to the members, trying to convert and minimize talking to ourselves. Because we know the benefits of AfCFTA, but we believe there are some other members from our different countries who don't know. And efforts that are done by countries in the implementation, in my opinion, are not sufficient, because it's hard to go in the rural area or in the urban center and ask anyone whether he or she understands what AfCFTA is and what it means in connection to the line of business that one is doing. And it is on this remark that I would like to, to draw back this audience so that we think differently and find a way of acting differently. I want to refer my talk to the statement made by Nelson Mandela, which says, "It always seems impossible until it is done." These words encapsulate the spirit of our gathering today. The integration of professional services under AfCFTA might seem like a daunting task, but history has shown that when passionate individuals and organizations come together with a shared vision, remarkable achievements become a reality. Mandela's wisdom reminds us that our collective efforts, dedication, and collaboration can turn the seemingly insurmountable challenges into opportunities. But words alone cannot drive change. Action is the catalyst for progress. Therefore, I urge each one of us to not only embrace the ideas of correct collaboration and integration, but also walk the talk. Let us commit ourselves to the tangible actions, namely knowledge exchange platforms. Each regular knowledge sharing sessions, webinars, and conferences where professionals from diverse fields can exchange ideas and expertise, learning from one another, is the first step towards creating a unified professional front. Number two, advocacy for recognition. Collaborate on advocacy efforts to ensure that qualifications and expertise are recognized uniformly across African nations. Together, we can influence policy changes that facilitate the movement of professionals and enhance the quality of services. Number three, cross-disciplinary projects. Encourage and support joint projects that involve professionals from multiple fields. Whether it's designing sustainable cities, advancing healthcare technologies, or promoting renewable energy, collaborative projects showcase the power of interdisciplinary teamwork. Number four, mentorship programs. Establish mentorship initiatives where seasoned professionals mentor the young generation across various professions. Such programs not only pass down knowledge, but also foster a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose. Number five, policy advocacy. Engage with policymakers at the national and continental level. Advocate for policies that promote collaboration, remove barriers, and create enabling environment for professionals to thrive and continue effectively to Africa's development. As we conclude, I call upon each professional association and its members to turn these ideas into action. Let us be proactive to our approach, relentlessly on our pursuit of excellency and our unwavering together. Let's walk the path of collaboration, integrity, and excellence. Let's transform the landscape of professional services in Africa, and in doing so, contribute significantly to the realization of AfCFTA's potential. I thank you, and let us embark on this journey of action together.
Thank you very much, Papas. I think you've captured and summarized our conversation today well. Really want to thank you, all of you, for your time, for great conversation. I see comments here. And just to let you know that we will continue to have this conversation is an umbrella association for associations. And if you want to know more about how to join AfCFTA as the umbrella body for associations, please do reach out to me. I'll be happy to be able to connect you. But most importantly is for us to continue to have this conversation, rally around areas of mutual interest. And ultimately, I think as everybody has said, we have to convert this into action. And action means we need a unity of purpose. So thank you very much to all of you for attending today's webinar. I hope that you found it very helpful and useful to your everyday work. And I do hope that also you will just join us in subsequent conversation so that we can grow a bigger and stronger movement to be able to support the work that we do and the members that we represent. Thank you very much all, and I wish you a pleasant evening and see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. Bye.
Okay, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.